Thank you very much for the invitation. Nice to be here.
Great. First of all, this sounds like a pretty serious development here. It's something that we're hearing may impact as much as a fifth of Nigeria's oil production. Can you just speak to exactly what is going on right now in terms of the impact we're seeing?
Yes, of course, the impact, I suppose, has yet to be seen, but of course, as you rightly say, around a fifth of the crude oil production of Nigeria seems to have been shut in, or has at least had force majeure declared, meaning that obviously obligations were not necessarily going to be met by the suppliers. And the reasons mostly are sabotage. Bonny Light has been in trouble for the last few months, really, but I think the force majeure was expected. I think we've seen the last 5 days there hasn't been much supply. So when force majeure finally came yesterday, I think it was no real surprise. For Cardos, a bit more of a surprise there, but clearly a mixture of sabotage and maybe some of the flooding affecting supply there. But the impact, of course, on Nigeria is simply a loss of oil revenues for the time that the oil is down.
Absolutely, but we're not seeing the impact on the oil price just yet. Your thoughts on what impact we may see there?
Well, oil prices have been falling recently. There is a lot of refinery maintenance in Northwest Europe, and that's gradually ending. But I think front month Brent contracts now on the futures exchange are currently trading as low as $108, which is obviously much lower than it has been in recent weeks. One of the main issues, I suppose, particularly for Nigeria, is that the US is now supplying itself with so much light sweet crude oil from the oil shale fields of up in Bakken and Eagle Ford and grades like this, and the natural home for a lot of the export grades from Nigeria is the US, and without them buying, of course, prices in Nigeria have been impacted a great deal recently.
Okay, now this obviously is a serious issue. Oil bunkering, we're hearing that it's partly linked to oil theft. Your thoughts on what Nigeria can learn from what is happening elsewhere in the world, because it really gives one the impression that we just haven't gotten it right in terms of our oil sector. We still have this petroleum industry bill stuck in Parliament. We're hearing about bunkering and the impact that is having on production. And in fact, many people to point to a lack of transparency in terms of how much exactly Nigeria is producing. But coming back to the point about bunkering, is this a phenomenon that we see elsewhere in other oil-producing countries?
It is prevalent, but I think that Nigeria probably has the worst reputation for it. I think that the largest amount of oil theft probably goes on in Nigeria. I mean, it's hard to get exact figures. As you say, transparency isn't what it could be in a lot of these countries where there is a lot of oil theft. But there are, of course, many countries where there isn't really any oil theft to speak of. And I suppose the way to combat it, and I know that there are some initiatives now in place in the Niger Delta. There's this new movement by Dele Kole, the politician in the Niger Delta, saying that that even maybe southern European gangs are implicated in Nigerian oil theft. And I think highlighting things like that and raising the profile and of course tough sentencing on those who are ever caught is of course probably a useful thing. But I think it all comes down maybe to a degree to maybe the people feeling there is a fairer deal for the oil revenues in Nigeria. If maybe some commentators have said if the money were better shared out, then maybe this wouldn't be such an issue. But of course that's very difficult to say for sure.
All right, absolutely. And I also hear that the floods may be a factor as well. Can you just speak to that? What impact, and of course we had record floods in Nigeria earlier this last month. Your thoughts on the impact that is having on the oil sector?
Well, I know that Mrs. Alison Madueke said that flooding wasn't really affecting production, but I think these force majeures are to an extent linked to it. So I think we are now seeing the floods having some kind of impact. And I know there was an LNG force majeure as well from the French major Total, which is definitely linked to flooding. So clearly there is an issue. And if it's twinned with the oil theft as well, which of course leaves the infrastructure damaged, then it's even less likely to be able to cope in the face of major flooding. So it really is a terrible double problem for some parts of Nigeria.